Let's go ahead and call the Finance Administration Committee together. City Clerk, if you'll note attendance, and we'll move on with agenda approval. Are there any additions, subtractions, or other comments in regards to the agenda? All right, any objections to taking the agenda as presented as approved? All right, we will move forward with the agenda. All right, this time we have public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to make comment before the committee? Keep in mind, again, we do not take online public comment. If it's online, please send us it through email, through council or through city clerk, and we'll get it that way. Seeing nobody standing up, we'll go ahead and proceed on past public comments into the minutes. Approval of minutes dated October 21, 2025. There's a draft in there. Chair has no questions or revisions, or any questions or revisions from other committee members. Any objections to taking the minutes as presented? All right, we will approve those minutes as presented and move on to the next agenda item. With that, we have consideration of claims report dated November 10th, 2025. Having reviewed, I have no questions or clarifications required, nor have I received any from other council members in email prior to this meeting. Are there any questions or clarifications sought by other committee members? Any objection to taking the claims report as presented? All right, we will take the claims report dated 11/10/2025 and move that forward on to council. With that, all right, not fair if you're going to switch it around and take the agenda away from me. I can get back to it. Well, let's move on to agenda bills. We have AB 25-100 resolution adopting the 2025 strategic plan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to introduce Brian Murphy from Burke Consulting, who you've all met through the process. And this is the accumulation of about a year's work. And so we are at the finish line. So you have the draft materials, and I'll turn it over to Brian to do a quick recap and answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Chair, committee members, Mayor Ross. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this evening and share the draft strategic plan. So in the packet, which I appreciate the clerk printed for you all, there are a number of pieces, one of which is the strategic plan itself. And this is the only document in there that would be adopted by council. I believe this will go forward at your next council member meeting on November 10th. The other pieces are supporting. The second is a summary of feedback that was received when we surveyed community members and stakeholders about their thoughts on the draft strategic plan. And I'd like to spend a few minutes recapping that if I could before taking any of your questions. But the third piece is an implementation plan. I'll just note that is a internal document for use by the city in sort of tracking progress on implementation of the strategic plan year over year, and using that to build up externally facing report cards and the like. So there are two examples of that. One is the annual action plan for 2026, highlighting areas you may focus on in 2026. And then the last piece in that packet is a shell of a document. It's really a end of year report that you might produce at the end of the year, sort of recapping progress on the implementation of the strategic plan. So in terms of the feedback on the draft strategy, we received input from 18 individuals. 14 of those were community members, and 4 had participated in the strategic planning process prior to that. Some of the community members may also have given input on the community survey, but the 4 had participated in discussion groups that were run by my colleague Isa Harada, and they provided input. So we've provided a verbatim record of all the input received. We had asked 3 open-ended questions: their overall impressions of the draft strategy, what they'd like city leaders to consider as you adopt and implement the plan, and what questions they have about the strategic plan or city government. So we were intentionally very open-ended in these questions, and we wanted to provide you literally word by word, all of the input that we received. And much of that input, all of the input rather, was extremely thoughtful, a lot of good detail feedback. We've provided just a brief summary of that. I'll just hit a few themes. So first is there was support for the strategic plan. So I think that's worth noting. So 6 respondents in particular sort of appreciated the focus of the strategic plan. There were concerns expressed about growth and development. 7 respondents noted that, and I know this is a tension in your community as in other communities. There were concerns about the impact of growth on infrastructure, traffic, and livability, and also environmental sustainability and community character. There were concerns in particular about the mill site, and I'm sure those are concerns that you may have heard before. There was a range of opinions on economic development, some very strong ideas about the direction the city should take in a more detailed economic development strategy than you see in the strategic plan, an interest in wine tourism, for example, and then other specific sectors that the city might focus on in economic development. And that's really a theme, I think, is that a lot of the feedback, I would say, is great guidance, good thoughts about implementation as you advance the 3 pillars of the strategic plan. There was strong emphasis on using regional partnerships to advance the interests of Snoqualmie and your neighbors in the valley. Desire for more diversification and specific tactics for fiscal sustainability. And this was 2 individuals in particular. Some comments about integration with other city plans that we've consulted in the planning process, like the comp plan and the capital improvement plan. And then lots and lots of ideas about implementation. A lot of great detail that I would be going back to as I think about year by year implementation. A number of questions as well. I think are really healthy, good questions for community members to be asking. And then 6 individuals shared their email addresses and their names, which we've passed along to staff so that they can continue to receive updates from the city. So I'm happy to take additional questions. I think the question before you all is, well, in addition to querying me about what we've heard, is if there's any changes that you'd like to make to the strategic plan before that goes forward to the full council.
Do you have any? Okay.
I was just hoping that you could provide a little bit more information about or whether we have more information about the composition of the 18 people who answered in response and had a chance to look at the strategic plan. I know that it went out to the ROA and that it was sent out a few different other ways. I just want to make sure that the responses that we got aren't just, for example, coming from folks up on the ridge, right? And make sure that we're hearing, from a good section of the population, in addition to, I know, the measures that you took at the beginning of the plan.
I think city staff did a terrific job in promoting the opportunity. There went out in the news release, an e-news blast, a quarterly newsletter, and social media. So of the 14 who responded from the community, I'm actually not certain sort of who they were. The 4 who had participated in other events also are sort of just part of the mix of feedback. We didn't track sort of by individual. So I would have loved to have gotten more feedback from your city population. I would not at all presume to think that the 18 individuals who provided feedback are representative of the community of close to 15,000. So it's an extremely small sample, and it's folks who are really passionate, I think, about the future of the city. They care deeply, as you can see in their feedback.
Well, but was it the usual vocal minority?
I don't think we know.
Okay.
I think it was set up so we didn't know, right? Or do we know? She doesn't know.
She's coming though. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Nicole Weeby, the community liaison. If I recall, we met with downtown merchants, downtown residents, ridge merchants, and specifically South Asian residents on the ridge. I'm trying, do you remember? I feel, do you have a list here?
Do have a list. Yeah, this was earlier in the process. It's right here. So human services providers, Snow
Right.
Valley Chamber.
Correct. So Human Services, Snow Valley, the YMCA. Oh, yeah, we had people from the Y and we had the teenage and the youth population in that. One of the ROA staff members who also is part of the population that we were asking, she participated in that. So I believe those were the groups of the stakeholders that we met with.
And that was at the beginning of the process, correct?
It was in, I would say within June. It was like mid-June to like around June 20th in that timeframe, probably those last couple weeks in June.
Yes, so just to summarize that, there were two opportunities for community input through the planning process. One earlier on, I think we had a very robust participation through community outreach and the survey. And then at the end here, we've given a chance in a 2-week period to give input, and that's where we got the 18 responses.
Any other questions or? Go ahead, Joe.
Just to add a comment that yeah, the verbatim feedback is very impressive.
Yeah.
It's a lot of words. I wish I could get my students to do that more often instead of good. Yeah.
Yeah, my only concern, guys, is tonight's election night. I do not believe strategic plans are an entity on their own. They're more the people who do that, so there may or may not be an issue come a week and we'll deal with it then. All right, so we'll move this forward to council. And I assume non-consent.
Yeah, thank you.
you very much.
Nothing else. I want non-consent buy-in. Not just. All right, with that, let's move on to Agenda Bill 25092, ordinance adopting Snoqualmie School District impact fees. This is second reading, isn't it? Or did we do a reading?
No.
Okay, this will be first reading.
That was the
This is, this,
capital improvement plan or whatever it was.
And this is the fees off of.
Right.
Okay.
okay, good evening, council. I'm Mona Davis, Community and Economic Development Director. So at the last meeting, we brought the capital facilities plan to you. Tonight, we're bringing, and that was through a resolution. Tonight, we're bringing the ordinance through that actually adopts the impact fee itself. Ryan Stokes is here with the Snoqualmie Valley School District. He's the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. Happy to answer any questions tonight that you have. But again, this is just confirming that we will be willing to accept the new school impact fees starting in January of 2026. You will note in the packet that there is an increase of almost $3,000 for single family school impact fees. Multifamily, there's no change. Those are remaining the same. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have. This is a pass-through fee, so there's really no budget impacts to the city. This is an annual thing that we do in conjunction with working with the school district to make sure that they get their needed impact fees.
So on the, help me understand, stop me if I go too far. On the impact fees per single family dwelling unit, that's not a per 100,000, that's for each house, $13,000.
That's for each single-family building permit that is issued. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay.
And the lot, having gone through this a couple of times, we've always adjusted multifamily a little lower in consideration for these are, starter homes, individuals starting off in life and everything else, and done single homes a little heavier. My concern is that if we continue that, you'll get a broad spread, and we're seeing about, almost 50%, 100% difference between multi-unit and single family at this stage. Help me with the logic there, and is that?
Perfect. Yeah. Good evening, Ryan Stokes with Snoqualmie Valley School District. Our impact fees are driven by a formula, and one of the driving factors is the number of students generated from the dwelling unit. Typically, there are more students generated from a single family home than from a multifamily home. And that is one of the main reasons why the single family cost is higher. One thing that we've noticed this year is that we've started, in the past, we have used neighboring districts' multifamily rates because we didn't have a lot of multifamily units in the valley. With Panorama and a few others coming online, we've started calculating our own rates. In this last update, we noted that Panorama's student generation rate is higher than a single family home rate. And a market rate complex next to Timber Ridge was also higher than single families. So if we used the current multifamily rate, the multifamily fee would have been almost $5,000 more than what we are proposing. So because Panorama is a big component of that current calculation, we decided to add an additional discount on the multifamily and keep it the same as last year's rate. Because we wanted to wait for the large multifamily development in North Bend on the Dahlgren property to become fully occupied so that we would have a larger population of multifamily units to assess our multifamily generation rate, the student generation rate from those. So we made that decision to cap the multifamily this year, and we'll revisit it in next year's analysis. Also of note to the council, the law is changing around impact fees, and going forward in future in assessments, we have to differentiate in more detail the multifamily and single family. We can't just use a single family and multifamily. It has to be driven by either bedroom count or square footage or some other rationale. And so everyone's kind of struggling with what that is, because we all know like bedroom count depends on if it has a closet, but you could not have a closet and it's not counted as a bedroom, but then it's used as a bedroom and generates students potentially. Square footage is kind of the single family versus multifamily. Multifamilies are typically smaller square footage, but there's a new requirement that it needs greater, more buckets, if you will, which is also hard because nobody has been tracking those buckets. So when you try to find a home and say, well, how many bedrooms is in that? Your county doesn't have that information as far as, or square footage, or, so they're struggling with how to gather that info in a way that we can then calculate how many students are coming out of it. So everyone's kind of struggling with what that new approach is, and different jurisdictions are, I think that also impacts other jurisdictions as well as far as their own impact fees, but everyone's kind of taking slightly different approaches. And so the future calculation is going to be a little bit different, and we'll give you that update in the next capital facilities plan. That was a roundabout way. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Okay.
Really early on, and then you went on, but it's, you did good.
I just have one quick follow-on question. How would an ADU be qualified in this situation?
So my understanding is sometimes it depends on the jurisdiction on what folks qualify that for. An example is City of North Bend had cottage homes, and they weren't sure whether that should qualify, because the cottage home is not attached to anything. So is that a single family or a multifamily? And so City of North Bend counted the cottage homes by square footage. If it was under square foot, they classified it as a multifamily, and it was a single family. And that was the jurisdictional decision. I would assume that ADUs would be multifamily, but we don't have a lot of those. So that's a great question. But I think the district has to kind of follow the jurisdictional definition of those, because the city's collected on our behalf. And that can change based on the square footage or bedroom count with the new kind of requirements.
I just wanted to say really quickly, I believe that we exempt ADUs from paying an impact fee
Okay,
currently.
that's
I'll
good to
double
know.
check that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I assume we have to do 2 readings on this?
Yes,
All right,
yes.
let's go ahead and move that forward for reading at council come Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on to Agenda Bill 25-107, 2026 mid-biennium amendment.
Good evening, committee. Jana Walker, Budget Manager. I am going to share the amendments that we are proposing today. Just one moment, let me share my screen. Okay, just for a very high level summary, unlike some of the amendments that you've seen recently, this actually represents a reduction in appropriation. So we're reducing the spending within the city proposed within this amendment. The citywide appropriation reduction is 16.1 million. There's also a reduction in revenue of 19.8 million. For the general fund specifically, that reduction in appropriation is 1.15 million, and the reduction in revenue is 1.74 million. We're going to go into each of these amendments. The first one relates to the North Bend Police Services ILA. We had to make a number of changes throughout the city, and there are some attachments to this agenda bill that will describe that in detail. The reduction in total is 7.75 million, and that is primarily within the general fund, but there are also some residual effects that affect the whole city because of our internal service cost allocation. So you'll see those when you look at those specific tables. We haven't gone into detail for things like utilities, but we have for our internal services and also for our general fund functional classifications. And I'm happy to go into that, but also if you don't have any questions, you can look at those attachments, and I think it'll really describe very well some of the smaller changes that we're making throughout the departments. There are some reductions that include employee reductions. Those are some of our bigger ones that you'll see, but then there's also a lot of really small changes that we've made to collectively absorb the impacts of that interlocal agreement ending. I'll show, actually, no, I won't jump there. Toward the end of this presentation, I will discuss some of those positions that are changing.
Oh, go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
So just to clarify on this one, a lot of questions technically, but we'll get around them. So this is essentially saying we used to spend a lot of money to police North Bend, and that will no longer be happening. This isn't okay, North Bend, already taking that out of the picture. This is further reductions in the police department beyond the spending in North Bend. I'm not
So-
sure if my question made sense, but.
It does. You were
Okay.
correct in that reduction in appropriation includes the North Bend Fund. So it drops to zero by the end of, March 31st. We no longer expect to have expenditures coming out of that. So yes, that reduction is encapsulated within this. And then this is also including things like the sergeants who are shared between the two departments, all moving into Snoqualmie, and then some reductions and revisions that we've made to be able to incorporate those additional expenditures. And then losing, is it 12 point, a certain number of North Bend Police Department employees that requires that we adjust all of our internal service charges. So there are just a lot of moving parts with this. In a lot of ways, it's like a brand new budget just with this one amendment. And then there's also a 1B and a 1C to this amendment where we have agreed to pay North Bend $240,000 for their vehicles, for their equipment replacement and repair. And then also at the very end of this, we're currently forecasting that we will have a little bit of funds left in the North Bend fund. So that would be transferred into the general fund. So it's kind of a 3-step process there.
And so this reduction appropriation of $7 million plus isn't like we're going to now have that extra to spend somewhere else. It's also that those being paid for largely by North Bend.
That is correct.
So then we have that huge reduction in revenue to
Mhm.
kind of match the reduction in appropriation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Councilman Christensen?
If my memory serves me correctly, under the terms of the contract, though, there were some provisions in case our officers had to go and take some action once the North Bend contract is closed. Can we actually shut the fund on that March deadline? Or do we need to leave some of that open in order to keep the accounting?
That may be a bigger question than I should answer.
So I would say those are expenditures that will likely come out of the general fund at that time. So we can certainly set up a number of accounts within non-departmental to handle that. In essence, what you're asking about is, I believe the $100,000 is allocated in there for additional services such as the storage, for example, of evidence and other sort of expenses that might arise as a result of having to handle those cases, those residual cases from then on. I think we could shut the fund down completely on March 31st, and those expenses could be paid out of the general fund at that time.
She made comment though, I thought the last contract or what we settled on was they got the cars, but we kept the ER&R.
The agreement included us giving them the cars and also making a payment because those cars aren't brand new. There is some amount that's been paid in that's during that time period. And the $240,000 was what was determined as the appropriate amount between the two cities. So it's both.
Okay, double check the contract, okay? That's all I'm asking. I thought the ER&R was, we took it off and they never came back on us, but just double check. My memory could be.
We can
wrong,
double
and
check.
It has been
We like to
multiple
double check.
times today. All right,
Okay. The next one down there is liability and property insurance. And I should say too, you can see that there's some light blue ones up there. Those are the ones that affect the general fund specifically. May also have an impact on some of the other funds, but if it's a white one, then it doesn't have any impact on the general fund, just so as you're viewing these. Our liability and property insurance, over the last few years, we've seen that increase sharply as many folks have seen insurance rates go up. Ours has increased over 20% for the last 3 years. So once again, we believe that we will be short for what we budgeted in 2025. We think we need an additional $63,000. And that's not, we think, we have received that bill. So we know exactly what we need for that. And we're forecasting that we would need $117,000 for 2026. If you add those two numbers up, you'll see that it doesn't quite equal what we're requesting in appropriation for that item. That's because that general liability insurance, property and liability insurance is for the whole city. So it's things like police cars, of course. It's also things like our water reclamation facility. So all of that expense is allocated out to all of our different funds, which increases that expense. And then there's also some associated revenue back to the general fund related to this one.
you have a question or?
Mayor Pro
No.
Tem Holloway.
Hmm?
Sorry to answer your earlier question about the agreement that we entered with North Bend. In section 8, subsection 2, it states that Snoqualmie is to pay North Bend $240,000 and transfer 4 vehicles, and then lays out which of the 4 vehicles.
All right,
Our next item is workers' compensation insurance. This is another insurance that has sharply increased. For our public safety, it's gone up over 50% over the last 3 years. 52% it looks like, and then 14% for all other operating divisions. So we've estimated the cost for that. And a substantial portion of this does fall within the general fund. One of the attachments goes through in detail and shows how these amendments play out across each funds, and I would encourage you to look at that if you do want to know more detailed information for that. Our next one is outside legal expenses, and I will turn the time over to our city attorney.
All right, so good evening. I'm Dina Burke. I'm your city attorney. So I joined the city in December of 2024, and then 2025 became a very eventful year. So sound legal advice is necessary to protect the interests of the city and ensures less financial risk and exposure later. Being an in-house city attorney, you only have one in-house city attorney, and it's kind of similar to being like a general practitioner, medical doctor. Issues can arise that require specialty nuanced care that may need a specialist, just like if you see your doctor and you need then be referred to like a cardiologist or a dermatologist. There can be specialty legal issues that are highly specialized areas of law. So sometimes we have to hire specialists. And then we also had a lot of really intense, robust issues that came up in 2025. This is an overview of what 2025 legal projects and going into 2026. Transparency in government is really important, but sometimes a full discussion of legal issues may not be appropriate for an open forum because it does expose the city to more risk. So for some of these issues, I'm just giving a really high level overview to talk about what we've had going on in 25 and is going into 26. But some of these, it may not be appropriate to go into the weeds in an open public forum just to protect the interests of the city. So as we all know, we had a North Bend Police Services ILA. We had intense negotiations. Unfortunately, that did lead to litigation, but we were able to bring the two cities together to have an agreement that's working for both cities. Also, unfortunately, the former police chief, there was a personnel investigation. That was a very intense legal period for the legal team. It did result in two separate public records lawsuits where an injunction was sought to prevent the release of public records. And we also hired outside counsel in order to expedite the review of public records in order to get those records out to the community and media members who are requesting them. We wanted to get those out as soon as possible to have transparency with the community. There was also a petition for right-of-way vacation that resulted in multiple hearings. We hired outside counsel to represent the staff position because that would have been a difficult position for me. Other cities that have more than one in-house attorney will then basically wall off the attorney that's presenting the staff opinion. Instead, we hired an outside attorney to do that. And then we're continuing to follow counsel's direction to pursue the purchasing options. And then can you do the next slide, please? All right. We also have outside counsel working on the Comcast franchise agreement. We're also hoping that some of those costs will be recouped through that agreement. We have various code enforcement issues, both new and ongoing. We do have one active lawsuit, City versus Ladder Properties, which we do have outside counsel for, and that started here. It went to the hearing examiner, then it was appealed to King County Superior Court, and now it's being appealed to the Division I Court of Appeals. Briefings have been filed. An oral argument is anticipated in January of 2026. There is a King County inquest into use of force for a 2022 police case. And we've hired outside counsel for that. That's a specialty area of law that there's a couple attorneys that specialize in that, and that inquest is going to be taking place after Thanksgiving. We take protecting staff very seriously. We have both a legal and a moral duty to protect staff, and unfortunately, staff may be subject potentially to harassment, and we've taken a lot of steps with outside counsel to ensure that staff are protected and to prevent the harassment of city employees. We have the Snoqualmie Valley Health Hospital expansion. We've had utilized land use outside counsel regarding the development fees and negotiations for their expansion. Next slide, please. We also have outside counsel for tribal law issues. That's a highly specialized area of law. We anticipate, depending on nuanced legal issues that come up with affordable housing or the mill site development, that specialized land use counsel may be needed. And also just in general surprises. I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict what's going to happen in 2026 and beyond. I'll take every step I can to mitigate risk, but legal surprises can and do happen. So it's really hard from a budgetary perspective to plan for the next year, but we do our best. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council Christian.
Thank you. I have a question not necessarily related to what you just said, but on page 112, it was in footnote 1, it said that, and it was talking about the adjustments that were representing increase or decrease in the opening fund balance. And then it goes on to say, and there was a $471,000 lawsuit settlement that was expected to be received in 2025, but was, and then the footnote drops off. I didn't,
Oh, that was actually received in 2024. It was about perhaps town center improvement. We had an ongoing lawsuit. You probably heard that it was settled in late 2024 and we expected to receive it 2025, but it came very quickly in 2024.
oh, thank you. I don't have any other questions for you. I appreciate how in-depth you were, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I agree that it's important to have outside legal counsel for a number of the different types of things that have come up, so thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Jones.
And then in our table here, for those of us following along at home, I believe I just closed it? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, good. This is let's see, am I in the right column here? Yes, this is a one-time appropriation increase. So I believe that the number, the 140,000, if I'm on the right line here,
Mhm.
that's in addition to whatever had been appropriated. And
That's correct.
I have a fuzzy memory. How much had been appropriated?
Within the administrative departments, we had appropriated 175,000. 100,000 of that is intended for our ongoing fire union negotiations and other HR personnel matters. About $50,000 was specifically for legal, and then there was another 25,000, I believe, for records requests.
And then this would be just beyond that to cover all the
Beyond.
things as discussed.
And this is a 2025 number. We have not forecasted what we expect to need for 2025 or 2026. So this is all focused on 2025
Got it.
and what's transpired.
Thank you.
Sorry, so I think there was a question about what's recoverable. The franchise agreement, the legal fees on that, I'm not gonna promise anything because I don't know exactly what'll happen, but I'm hopeful that the franchise, what we've spent on the franchise agreement, and then it's gonna be up to the court on the latter properties case. We are going to request attorneys. We have requested attorneys fees for the appeal. But that's going to be up to the judge.
Our next one is fire department health insurance. And when we budget for empty positions, we often budget middling to high insurance. And in this case, it wasn't sufficient. The folks that we hired had families, and so they needed more insurance. And this gets us to where we need to be for the end of the biennium to cover all of the insurance for these new hires. The next one is our AED replacement, and Chief Bailey is going to come up and discuss that one.
Well, hang on, because you're talking 13,000, you're expecting it to get reimbursed. I got a long list. I'm trying to manage time now. Anybody object to having a new AED?
No?
It sounds like they're expired. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appreciate the life-saving measures.
I'm glad you got it. You want to get out of here sometime too, right?
Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's a good thing. Splash pad operations was $36,000 with a $26,000 appropriation in general. So are we expecting the operating cost of the splash pad to be about $26,000 a year?
No. I want to answer, but Bill's job.
Philip Bennett, Deputy Director, Parks and Public Works. The purpose of this amendment is that we did not anticipate all costs with the splash pad. It was our first time around. So an example of that is it cost us about $9,000 in water for the splash pad. We didn't anticipate that. We didn't know what the water usage was going to be. So that will be an ongoing expenditure that we'll need. An example of a one-time expenditure is we had to extend the fence between the splash pad and the skate park because we didn't want a skate park to hit somebody on the splash pad. That was $8,000. And so those are the two categories that explain this. And so there will be some additional ongoing costs with the splash pad.
Right, and that's the 25,684. You're expecting that as an annual additional cost for the splash pad.
Yes, sir.
That is for the biennium though,
Oh, okay.
2025 or 2025 and 26?
2 years.
Both.
2 years, okay. Cool. All right, then public defender. We're having additional expenditures of 57,930. Probably some conversation around what the note on the side there, what's that mean?
Chief Haracy, did you want to speak to this one?
Interim Chief Haracy, council members. So this topic is obviously one that we've talked about quite a bit, especially in public safety coming forward with an increase of public defender fees over the next 10 years. This is because of a Supreme Court ruling earlier this year in June that says that they have to have a reduced caseload. So that reduced caseload takes them down. The projected goal is, I believe it's 120 cases for misdemeanor cases within the next 10 years. In talking with our current contracted public defender, they estimated the cost going up to 160,000 for 2026. And we currently budget for 2025 the $99,290. So we're having to do that increase. The state has allowed for us to have an offset with that due with the public safety sales tax when we get to that point, to kind of help offset this additional expense, because they foresaw that coming through when they were going through the legislative session.
Questions or comments? The only comment I have is I'm an old programmer, so I'm very compartmentalized. And it starts out with none currently exist. None what? And I think you mean no tax is what you're suggesting
Right,
here.
we have,
It's
right
not
now
that
we have
no
no
public
tax.
defenders exist.
So we've been paying for the public defenders based on state law. With the sales tax that the state is, once we meet those requirements and get approved and everything, that is what is designed to help offset some of these public defense expenses, once we get to that point. But in the meantime, we do have to make the adjustments for the proposed increase. And we're currently with the city attorney, we are reviewing the proposed ILA with the Valley Defenders and working through that process.
Thank you.
I think what you're seeing in that final column, the header says new revenue sources. So some of these expenditures are offset by new revenues, and this is not offset by any new revenue.
Okay, thank you.
We're out of the general fund now. Our next one is a utility fees transfer. For a number of years, we've had a body of funds sitting in our non-utility capital fund. That's utility fees, and we can't use those in non-utility without a very specific reason, supporting utility projects. So we are proposing that we would move that back to the utility fund where we can use that for projects. And this amount includes any estimated interest for the year as well. The next one is another large one, the utility rate study adjustments. If you recall, when we originally created our budget, it was based on assumptions that placeholder amounts that were in the utility rate study. And then subsequently during 2025, we adopted a final rate study, or at least portions of a final rate study. And this amendment both trues up our budget to what is proposed in the rate study. It also adds a couple of things that you've heard discussed. you know that we are not taking out a bond this year, and we also have an increase in our ecology loan. So this amendment adjusts for those two items. We've discussed Sandy Cove bank stabilization, moving that from 2025 to 2026. It's things like that. We spent a little bit more on the water reclamation facility in 2024 than we estimated. So we've reduced some of the spending that we expect to happen for that in 2025. But for the most part, this item is truing up things to that utility rate study.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Councilor Gibson.
did you mean that we spent more this year and we're therefore decreasing it next year? Because I thought you said 2024 and then 2025. So I just want to make sure. I'm
Yeah,
tracking.
we thought we would spend it in 2025, but we spent it in 2024 because that project was a little bit accelerated. It moved really quickly once it was going. So instead of assuming that we will still spend those dollars that we already spent, we're just reducing the expected spend for this year. And there is a very good summary. You can see what exactly is affected by these items. The next amendments are all kind of pro forma or housekeeping items. They're all associated with an agenda bill, so I'm just going to fly through them. The stormwater system plan. There is an amendment to Eagle Lake Reservoir and the loan. And then we have a project amendment in water reclamation facility, which is funded by the Main and Drain Replacement Program. That's 13A and 13B. And then finally, there's that business park lift station improvement project that got kicked off earlier this year. So that brings us to our combined ongoing and one-time appropriation decrease of 16.1 million. We have some supporting documents. We can discuss the economics of the city and the broader impacts of both this amendment and the environment, or we can save that for council.
No, we are having a work session at 6 o'clock. Is the intent to go over some of this material and the current budget where we are?
So I think we've presented a lot of the detail in front of you today. I think it would be good to spend that 6 o'clock time focusing on what the financial forecast looks like, because that's a very important story that we need to share with council. And we could potentially save some of these budget amendment detailed conversations potentially when the agenda bill comes up later. So I'd prefer to kind of spend that time summarizing the budget amendment and what that's going to do overall to the impact to our financial condition. And we want to make sure that we're presenting you financial forecast charts for how we see it moving forward. There's certainly been a lot of adjustments to our assumptions overall. We want to make sure that those are firmly in your head when you go into later November.
Yeah. Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Okay, so I did some scary math here in Excel. And the amount for the change in appropriation, mine was like less than % difference. So that's good. And then when it comes to the revenue, I didn't see that totaled up. So when I looked at that, it looked like our revenue was down somewhere around 19-20 million, something like that. So that makes a $4 million delta there. And that adds up because that was with everything, not just separating out the blue from the white. And on line 10, we have the 11 million versus the 15 million, which is about a $4 million difference. If we can find line 10 somewhere. That slide or two.
Which
Line number 10. Yeah, there it is. The
Okay.
utility rate study
Mhm.
adjustments. So yeah, so that would add up to being the difference of the 4 million. So can you just remind me again how it's cool that we're down 4 million in revenue? And where that's going to come from.
So here you can kind of see typically when we spend more than our revenues increase, then we're spending fund balance down a little bit. So there's probably an element of that.
Right.
We can go through this line item by line item. There's some duplication here you can see. So these top 3 items, they're reductions in utility fees. So the fees that we're collecting. Then we also have a reduction in transfers out to capital. So we're kind of duplicating both the expenditures and the revenues that you're seeing, if that makes sense, because we call the revenue that comes into our operating funds, we send it out to our capital where it's also revenue. So it's a little bit of it's an intentional duplication because of how we do fund accounting. but it also exacerbates what you're seeing, that $4 million gap to some degree. Specifically, I would love to give you, may I come back next Monday with a very specific answer to that question?
Of course.
Thank you.
So I'll just emphasize that there are several exhibits that Jana has prepared for this. So I'd encourage council to go look at exhibit number 4 as well as exhibit number 5. So I think you're hitting right on it that there's a $4 million difference, I think overall, especially when you look at exhibit number 5 itself. I would also just relate to you too, that we're actually starting with a beginning fund balance that's actually higher overall than we had anticipated starting 2025 with. And so that's going to certainly benefit us, I think, overall to where the ending fund balance for 2026 across all funds in total is going to be about $2.5 million less, which is certainly a financial impact overall, which is something that we'll have to address. As I mentioned, as a part of this, we also have to consider what the finances of the city look like going forward too, and discuss some of those options to balance our future. We've talked about kind of the 3 options available to us: economic development, increasing our revenues, or finding service reductions overall. And what this is kind of portending, I think, a little bit, I see Jana making some faces. So tell me you can hit me if you need to, is portending a little bit is, it's getting a little bit closer to where we actually need to start making some of these decisions a little bit more quickly so that we can kind of right the ship a little bit quicker. Go for it. Sorry.
I do remember looking some of this up, and before, as you can recall, we planned on paying for all these capital projects with utility fees. So we would be increasing our utility fees to begin saving for these big projects instead of taking that hit in one big year, one hard year. And instead we're bonding, where we're able to take that hit in 1 year, and then we're spreading the cost out over many years. So I would say that just because there's a shortage in this particular year, this particular biennium, this is still part of that plan that we passed, which includes bonding. So you'll see big spikes in capital coming in, even though you don't see it exactly in this year.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to thank you very much for that. And we'll have more discussions at council. Sure. Let's move on to Agenda Bill 25098, resolution related to personnel policies. Anybody else?
Are we not talking about the staffing changes?
I'm sorry.
Or is this our staffing changes? Okay. Is there a staffing changes in the last, right? And we didn't talk about any of the staffing changes.
Oh, well, there are staffing changes in the budget adjustment. Can we hold on a second? Can we discuss those staffing changes? Sorry.
All right, so as part of the mid-biennial budget review, we have also have a number of staffing changes included as a part of that. Just to address the exhibit for everyone out there that's watching right now, that is incorporated into exhibit number 7 itself. Let me go see if I can find the slide that summarizes those changes across the departments. Overall. Yeah, it's that one. Well, there you go. Thank you, whoever did that. Yes. So in essence, what you're looking at is there's primarily a 17 FTE reduction between what we adopted as a part of the 2025-2026 adopted budget, as well as what we're proposing as a part of this budget amendment overall. As you can see, the majority of those reductions are within the North Bend police services that we've provided, so about 14.25 of a decrease overall. What you're also looking at is you're also seeing the actually Snoqualmie police increase to a level of 18 authorized FTEs from 16.65. So just as a reminder to everyone, last year when we produced the 25-26 biennial budget, we had allocated 16.65 positions to Snoqualmie and 14.25 positions to North Bend that were equal to the contract that we had proposed to North Bend at that time. In essence, to a degree, those were placeholders because obviously we hadn't reached any sort of conclusion or negotiation completion with North Bend at that time. So what we had incorporated into our budget was reflective of that kind of breakdown between Snoqualmie and North Bend. With the dissolution of the police services agreement, I think we've had discussions about what is the appropriate and ideal staffing level for the police department. Although potentially maybe not completely settled, but I think we're very much there in terms of knowing that we would hope to staff, or at least we're funding 18 positions moving forward in our Snoqualmie Police Department, for the remainder of this biennium and potentially into the future. Because we are taking on those additional positions overall in the police department, we have had to find, say, reductions elsewhere in order to make up for that difference. So that included a reduction to the administrative departments, 1.00 FTE. That's a communications assistant position. Community development, by the way, one of those is a result of the North Bend Police Services dissolution. That is a permit planning technician position overall. The other one is a transition of the community liaison to the communications department. So earlier this year, the community liaison moved up into the communications department out of CD. What you'll have in CD moving forward as through this budget amendment is basically your CD director, a planning/permit technician, a building official, and a senior planner. In terms of the fire and emergency management, you see a 0.10% FTE reduction there. What that represents is the mental health professional position. So the fire department was funding 10% of that position. 40% was funded by the Snoqualmie Police Department, and 50% was funded by the North Bend Police Department, portion of the police department. What you're looking at in terms of information technology is a 1 FTE reduction within that space regarding a IT systems engineer. So in total, we're proposing a reduction of 17 FTEs in total. And Jana, if I've got any of that wrong, you might as well come up here now and correct me. So.
So I guess the only question I have is, there have been some things we want to move forward on in community development, and part of it has been held back for staff availability to move it forward. And yet, I understand one's just shifting departments, but there's another head being taken out of community development. Considering what we're asking out of community development of late, is that right?
So we combined the building and planning permit tech into one position. It was a separate permit tech for each position. And there wasn't enough workload to support 2 full-time positions to do permit tech work. So as part of the budget, we combined into one. So that is the position that's being eliminated, and it's not enough money to pay for an extra planner. So it'd need to be an additional appropriation to that position in order to add a planner with that position. And we'd have to find that somewhere else.
Go ahead, Councilor Joseph.
Yeah. You all know that I'm concerned about our level of service and community development, and I appreciate that with regard to that particular position. I am not an expert in that field to agree or disagree, so I'm going to have to take staff at their word there. But with regard to the planners, we are asking them to do an awful lot in the next year. There's a lot in the strategic plan to do, and I have concerns about that number of heads, especially with regard to planners. So yes, I realize that would mean trying to find money from somewhere else for that position. And while I do not have the answer off the top of my head here, I would encourage us to get a little bit creative and try to find where those funds could come from. And then I guess if there's any follow-up just related to that before I go on to something else.
Similar concern.
Okay. Excellent. It sounds like I'm not perhaps just alone in the woods here, maybe on that. Okay, next thing was on the Snoqualmie Police Mental Health Professional and Community Co-Responder. That went away. I thought that was one of our priorities was to have the community or the mental health professional at some level, perhaps not staffed at 1.0. Maybe we don't have the work for that, but some amount. So could I just get a brief explanation on that? Or is the plan actually to just eliminate that position coming from the administration?
So in regards to the mental health professional position, there's a lot of things we're working on and pulling data based on the caseload that we've had over the last year to kind of give us a more accurate number. At this point in time, the numbers that I've run it is an estimated about 1% of our call volume that we've had for crisis intervention calls. Which means, to look at that of the need of our officers versus that position. When we have resources available to us, such as the Recovery Navigator program, our local hospital, Harborview, and things like that, that we're referring people to currently without that position being filled. The other side of that is one of the things that we have available to us. Again, I'm going to go back to it, is the possibility of that public safety sales tax, which is generated towards mental health in some aspects of it. But again, do the needs of what the city of Snoqualmie needs are meet the need for having that position and the cost of that. So we are pulling data. The city administrators tasked us with getting that data together for y'all. We'll bring it to, can bring that to public safety as we go forward, because there's been a lot of questions around that in public safety over that. But again, it's one of those it's right now, the numbers that we have for 2025 is it's approximately 1% of our call volume.
Just also hadn't been there for a lot of 2025. So can you define just that a little bit more, like the 1%? Is in like 1% of the call volume you would have called for that individual to go, or and 1% of the call volume someone actually did respond with that position in 2025?
So I'm looking at just the Snoqualmie calls.
Right.
I'm not including the North Bend side of things.
Absolutely.
And it is the calls that we have for crisis intervention and or calls that where we took somebody in on an involuntary commit or something like that. As I continue gathering that data, we'll get it together. It's, as we wrap up the end of the year, obviously we've got a lot of things that we're getting through to y'all and kind of pushing through. So that is it is being worked on. If that helps answer that question.
I think so. I guess let's keep working on it.
Councilman Christensen?
As we're looking at the information and kind of the benefit that we had when we had the mental health professional working here, I would also probably, without drafting obviously, but I think it might be helpful to understand, like, in addition to just responding to calls, because it was my understanding that she also did a number of follow-ups and things like that, that, if folks are in a difficult situation and already struggling with that, can prevent additional calls or bad outcomes down the road as well.
That's part of the information we're pulling is looking at what her follow-up casework was. And typically those were generated from calls that we responded to, whether, like, for instance, if an officer responded to a call this time of day where she wasn't on duty, she would be doing follow-up with them. We have resources that we've been utilizing through Eastside Fire. In the North Bend section, they've developed a mental health section for their response as well. And then we've looked at the Recovery Navigator program. One of the Duval's was looking at a contracting with somebody versus having a full-time staff, because they're a smaller city and, the resources are limited there as well. So we have to, we're taking all of that into consideration as we move forward on something that is a very minimal amount of our calls for service in the city. I'm not saying it's not a needed service, but it is something that we have to consider, that versus a patrol response, for example, or, other positions.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I'll just remark on that as well, that there's a grant program associated with the passage of 2015, I think, through the state too. And so those are potentially funds that could go towards a mental health professional as well. And I think those are good for 3 years, if I'm correct on that one. I just want to make one small correction as well. The change to the communications division is actually 0 because we're adding a community liaison to the communications division and then subtracting out a communications assistant. So it's a 0 change for that. The -1 that you see there for the administrative departments is actually my department. So it's a budget analyst position that's been vacant for a while. And just to add to this piece too, none of these positions were filled at the time. So these were all positions that were vacant that we've held open basically through the duration of this negotiation with the city of North Bend.
Sure.
Sorry, yeah, Councilman.
More generally speaking, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, because you're saying that none of the positions in the police were open, or are you saying none of, in terms of the staffing table that's on here, none of these are open?
Well, so let me remark about, so we did have police officers that have left, right? For example, for North Bend. So those positions are open. And as a consequence of that, we're subtracting them here from you see from this position table. But also the other positions associated with other departments in the general fund were also open and vacant for the duration of the negotiation. So those are not positions that are currently filled that we're now terminating, for example, or employees in place that we're now terminating. Those were positions that were vacant that we're now releasing.
Then I have one more specific question on that, if I may. So what about the legal assistant for the city clerk?
Yeah. Hi. So that, I think that position used to be under the city clerk and now it's under city attorney. So there is a legal assistant, deputy city clerk under the city attorney.
Okay, I
Okay,
think I
thank you.
understand what you're referencing. So when you look at Exhibit 7, you're actually going to see a -1 under the city clerk and then a +1 in the city attorney. So yeah,
Just checking. Thank
yeah.
you. Good people.
There's some of those movements that are taking place in that. Yeah.
I thought what I remember was that it was like 0.5 and 0.5 at one point between those two.
Shifting.
I think we want to align it under the city attorney primarily because she is taking responsibility for supervising that position.
But Robert does provide like clerking duties, so he is doing clerking work as well.
Thank you.
You know, for the purposes of budgeting, we kind of collapse all the administrative departments and divisions into one bucket called the administrative department's functional classification. And so we budget overall, we're budgeting for all the administrative kind of departments within that kind of realm and appropriating a total amount for that, all those departments and divisions collectively together.
Okay. All right, thank you. That, let's move on to personnel management policies.
Hi, Kim Johnson, your HR manager. This is basically just cleanup from the adopting the new personnel policies. So those were adopted back at the end of September. And this is basically just repealing some of the old policies that have existed out there. So it's cleaning up, just other policy manuals as well as some of those standalone policies.
Any questions or clarifications?
It's pretty straightforward, but yeah.
I think, can this, you want council discussion or you want to move that one to consent? Go ahead.
There's just a couple of things here that, it's a big document and I didn't see kind of like last time. I don't think there was a crosswalk of changes. Last time, largely it was that that'd be very burdensome to create and there'd be like 1,000 line items. This is fewer items, but more importantly, some of these just like they could be like big things, like establishing a telecommuting policy. That sounds like a big thing.
Yep.
rather than like you moved a comma.
Sure.
Or a comprehensive fleet policy.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I guess, can you speak to like where I might find those and what's changed on a couple of those things that just look a little bit bigger?
Yeah, so some like the telecommuting policy, there were some minor changes. You know, this was establishing it initially, which kind of came around during COVID. There really wasn't a telecommuting policy before. So, but the new policy is in the new manual. And
Okay,
does
so
that make
this
sense?
doesn't like establish a brand new thing. This is an amendment to the thing that already existed. Okay,
correct,
thank you.
yeah.
That makes me feel a lot.
And this is repealing some of these policies that already existed that were then looked at and put into the new policy manual that you adopted in September.
Superseded.
Okay.
We're just saying this no longer applies because we have a big document in front.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just trying to do some cleanup.
Yeah. All right, that makes me feel a lot better.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
No.
Good. Okay.
Personal policy, probably should just stay on the agenda for, in case you want to be some discussions. All right, let's move on to resolution adopting 2026 salary schedule for non-represented managed professional employees.
All right, so thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, as well. So the purpose of this agenda bill is for consideration and approval of the 2026 salary schedule for non-represented management and professional employees. As a part of your overall packet, we're providing you with three separate options, three separate COLA options. To begin with, option number one would incorporate an increase of 2.49% for a cost of living adjustment for 2026. When the city adopted a 25-26 biennial budget last year, it included a COLA of 2.49% for MMP employees as based on a forecast provided by King County in terms of inflation at that time. And so in essence, option number one would stay consistent with what we budgeted. Option number two includes a 2.72% COLA. That represents the actual June of 24 to June of 25 CPIW for the Seattle Tacoma Bellevue area. So based on actual data, consumer price index data. And that would retain basically the personnel's purchasing power as a result of that, if council were to accept option number two. Option number three includes a 3.11% COLA, which is equal to the average of the two unions that we know about right now in terms of what they're going to receive for COLAs. So police are scheduled, SPA, the Snoqualmie Police Association, is scheduled to receive a 3.5% COLA for 26, and the Teamsters are scheduled to receive a 2.72% COLA. And so in essence, this would be an average of those two unions. In addition, the administration is also proposing some following changes to the salary schedule to align with a recently completed classification and compensation study that looked at a limited number of positions at the city overall. As a part of that class and compensation study, the study recommended moving the human resources manager from a grade 10 to a grade 11 and changing the title to a human resources director, as well as moving the deputy finance director from a grade 10 to a grade 11, and then changing the title of the CIP project manager to just CIP manager. In essence, we've incorporated all this into some budgetary estimates for council's benefit, incorporated into a table. I believe this also includes the COLA increase from last year and how that was more than what we had budgeted for 2025. In essence, under the options, you've got a range between option one, which would require budget increase above what we budget for 25 and 26 of roughly $40,000. Option number two would be above what we budgeted for 25 and 26, would be about $52,000. And then option number three, if council were to choose that option, we'd be above budget about $65,000 or so. And so with that said, I think I'm happy to take any questions. We also have the city administrator here as well to potentially address the class and compensation study for the limited number of positions.
I'm holding off because I think it's more appropriate to have it at a council level discussion than here at F&A.
Yeah.
So I think we ought to move that forward and have that discussion at council.
I agree.
All right, with that, we'll get into, sorry, just a minute. Agenda Bill 25089, resolution amending, no, I cannot. Resolution amending financial management policy.
All right. So good evening, Chair, and so this is a resolution that would amend the city's financial management policy, and it was a team effort between myself and Finance Director Boutte. The financial management policy of the city of Snoqualmie, it's established by council, and it's designed to provide guidance to stakeholders about financial processes, control oversight, and financial transactions. And it's basically kind of the blueprint for fiscal stability and finances. The policy has several proposed changes to the policy. The big one that I was a part of was that currently, if the city's settling any lawsuit claim or entering a severance or separation agreement, it requires council approval. Occasionally, there are small claims, like for example, $30,000 or less, that could be administered and settled without going and taking council action. So this proposed amendment to the financial management policy would authorize the city administrator as the initial approval authority and the mayor as the final approval authority to resolve small claims defined as those totaling $30,000 or less, such as lawsuits, separation agreements, and severance agreement without requiring the council legislative approval. So for severance or separation agreements, this would be up to $30,000 with up to 1 year of COBRA healthcare insurance. This could enable strategic advantage to staff when negotiating and provide a streamlined approach that enables the city to address those minor legal matters promptly and strategically, and there can be advantages to doing it that way. There are also other changes in this proposed financial management policy. It would clarify and outline procedures for petty cash. It would harmonize the surplusing of assets with RCW 35.94.040. It would also update the purchasing thresholds for public works project staff labor and public works contract procurement categories to match the change to RCW 35.23.352. It would also, and then finally, once this policy is updated, we would, to a future F&A committee and council, be bringing forward a cleanup of the code in order to align the code with the financial management policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I guess I'm just confused by one statement was that to define the authorization level for public works projects to be in alignment with RCW?
Correct.
Yeah, so RCW 35.23.352 has a limitation built into it. In essence, because we're a code city, we're operating towards that through RCW 35A.40.210 as well. But in essence, they've set a limit in the code or in RCW that we've been following. The $116,000 that you see there that was initially built into the purchasing threshold here overall comes directly from the RCW. And so because not council, but the legislature updated that in June of 2024, we are now just reflecting that update here and proposing that to council. This doesn't, by the way, if you can choose to increase it or you can choose not to. So the city of Snoqualmie can be more stringent than state law provides overall. So that is certainly an option to council, but in essence, because we reflected state law in the past, I would hope to continue reflecting state law moving forward in terms of public works contracts.
All right. I'll have to look at it. I'm confused when you're telling me RCW is dictating what council can authorize for spending and what staff can authorize for spending, and which is what this is. So I'll go read. Councilman Christensen?
Yeah, so I have some concerns about kind of removing council approval from settlements,
Yeah.
both just in terms of having that additional layer of oversight if things are going sideways. I'd like to know, as those conversations are happening instead of, finding out later maybe. And then my other question is, when we're looking at the fiscal impact screenshot, right? The severance agreement authorization that we're being asked to approve is $30,000 plus the $36,000, which would get us to $66,000. Whereas, when you're looking at what the typical authorization levels are across the city for at least like purchasing and contract commitments, it's typically like if it's over $50,000, that's when council needs to be involved. And so I'm very uncomfortable with saying yes. As an attorney, I absolutely can see why that makes it easier. But in the seat that I'm in right now, it makes me uncomfortable. So.
Oh, I think there's a political component to those things, and you got a no vote from me.
And that doesn't say, just to be clear, that doesn't say anything against anybody in this room. I would want to be involved enough to know what's happening there. And I'd worry if I didn't have, if we all weren't in those conversations as well. Sure.
Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I think that if we struck that part, I think a lot of the rest of it, I'm mostly driving with. There were two things. Can you just explain to me again how the petty cash works, how it used to work versus what's being proposed, like how that's different? And then I'm mulling over the surplus assets going up to 50,000. I'm just mulling it in my head, but yeah.
So
Just
to
petty
start
cash.
off with the petty cash, what you're seeing there is actually in Snoqualmie Municipal Code right now. The attorneys are recommending us to pull that out of the municipal code. So in essence, all I did was copy that from the municipal code to save it somewhere and to put it somewhere, which is in the financial management policy. So we will be held accountable to it no matter what. It's just a transfer basically from the municipal code to a policy document.
Okay.
At this point, in terms of the surplus assets, I'm trying to reflect first off, it's confusing to a lot of people because it doesn't describe everything. So I wanted to make sure that the categories are very clear. Personal property is an important distinction to make, as well as, or define at least, as well as real property. And those actually mean things to the outside and the public overall. So it encompasses everything right under the sun for the most part within those two categories itself. So I wanted to make sure that that was very clear. In addition to that, I have to go to the section itself that describes the surplus or intergovernmental disposition of public utility assets. There's an RCW that governs that. I want to make sure that that is also reflective of our non-utility assets too. And I wanted to make sure that those were harmonized or at least brought together under one thing so that it confuses less people moving forward. Because in some instances, you're governing or operating under one set of rules for utility assets, so water, sewer, and stormwater, and then you're operating on another set of rules for non-utility assets. And so the goal is to just kind of bring that into alignment. In essence, we would require a council resolution as well as, I believe, a public hearing for all real property, no matter the value of it. And then for any personal property that's less than $50,000. So anything that's more than $50,000 would come before council for approval, as well as for a public hearing. In essence, that would cover, certainly I think, the large vehicle assets potentially overall, but then it would give the administration the ability to surplus, right, assets below that $50,000 mark. I've also included as a part of this and making sure that it's not less than its fair market value so that you could have some degree of assurance that we're seeking competition out there in the marketplace for the value of the goods. And so that the return that the city would get would be fair price and that we're not just giving away necessarily these assets to anyone. So I wanted to make sure that that was in there. But we do think it's potentially administrative burdensome for us to have to bring back, for example, a surplus list of assets to council in which you're surplusing a mower that might be worth $1,000 or so at the stage of it, at the end of its useful life. And I don't think that's necessarily where, in my opinion, where council may necessarily want to be, overall. So my recommendation is here. You can see that it's written, and hopefully you've heard of some of my goals as I was thinking through this.
Yeah, I think you mentioning about the not to be less than its fair market value, makes me feel warm and fuzzy.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move that forward to council non-consent.
Oh, sorry, I just want to ask, so is the direction to strike the part on the severance claims and what would be brought forward to council is the remainder of the changes?
Is staff, is administration amenable to striking that?
I think there needs to be further discussion and maybe executive session regarding it.
Okay, then no, it goes forward with it in the executive session. We'll deal with it in council. Well, wait, hang on, let's back up. Why is that an executive session? That is a strict policy discussion. It is not any particular severance package we're talking about. Anything else is a policy discussion. It's not covered
Yeah.
as an executive session.
If we're going to talk about specific examples in the past, I think it would, or current or potential future litigation, I think that should be an executive session, but the policy perspective, just generically, we can have that safely in the open.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I think that since this is a policy level thing, I don't see any reason to talk about any specific examples.
I think.
If we start to croach there, flag us off.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Right, absolutely.
I think one of the things that has come up is there will be instances where a staff member is leaving and it's a small dollar amount or maybe just a month of COBRA. And that would require, under the current financial management policy, council action, even for something as simple as 1 month of COBRA. And so there was the hope of streamlining that process. And so maybe we could have a discussion about, maybe there's a lower dollar number that council could feel more, or a lower number of months of COBRA that maybe council could feel more comfortable with.
if there's a severance package, I want a discussion.
Yeah. There's okay, I don't mean to turn over. Right, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Just making sure.
Sidebar.
Okay, anything to bring forward for this result of the conversation or? Okay, so is administrative amenable to striking that section out?
Not at this point.
All right, if not, goes to council.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. And Chair, one last thing.
Yeah.
On that, then if clearly the discussion does lead to the need for an executive session, then obviously the city attorney will flag us down and say, if we want to go down that road, we got to go to executive session.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and then we'll have an ordinance certifying increase in property taxes.
Yes, there are actually two ordinances about property taxes. One is an increase of 72,000, which is the maximum we're allowed to increase it. And then the second one would be levying those taxes. I do have a presentation that I can share, although it hasn't changed in substance from last year. Would
And
you-
you're gonna do it again at council.
Of course I am.
Yeah, let's,
Thank you. Any
let's
questions
save
about?
yourself time.
I remember from last year too, so.
Yeah.
All right, so we can move both those, the ordinance certifying increased property taxes and property tax ordinance, we'll move those to council. Non-consent, obviously. And
That's an ordinance.
discussions, council chamber murals. Do we need to discuss that tonight? Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
I just, in the interest of time, unless there's something urgent, I'd have to move on.
No, I'm not gonna get into legislative priorities. I'll get that written out and get to council. Let's just move on with it.
Amending the agenda then?
Huh? Yeah, move to amend the agenda and for council chamber murals and legislative priorities to take those off the agenda for tonight.
Second.
All right, any objections to doing that? Hearing no objections, they're off the agenda for tonight. With that, let's move on to council agenda review. Okay, we'll start at 6 o'clock. We'll have roundtable with budget review. You'll tell us if I up, yes?
We're proposing an executive session at 5:30.
5:30 or
Close session.
That's closed session at 5:30.
Okay, per the conversation. All right, so we'll amend this to show closed session at 5:30 for personnel matters. And then at 6 o'clock, we'll go into a budget review presentation, the Drew Show. And then at 7 o'clock, we'll go into call to order and roll call, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval, public hearings, presentation proclamations. We'll have public hearings on the property tax levy ordinance and the mid-biennial amendment. We will appoint a new fire department lieutenant promotion and new volunteers and certificate of completion for city academy participants. And then we'll move on to the consent agenda. I thought we had a few more things on the consent agenda than this. Yeah,
AB 25-101, the South King County Fire Training Consortium, ILA, was moved to consent, and then the sidewalk repair and replacement project from Parks and Public Works.
yeah. All right, then we'll have ordinances adopting Snoqualmie School District impact fees, critical areas ordinance. It will be a first reading. We'll have ordinance certifying an increased property tax, first reading, property tax levy ordinance, first reading, and mid-biennial amendment, first reading, and ordinance amending the minimum licensing threshold for out-of-city business SMC, which will be second reading and proposed for action. And anything else going in the ordinance section? All right, and then Public Safety Committee, their agenda item is moved up under consent. We will have Fire Department third quarter accreditation report. Informal only discussion. Community Development has no agenda bills. Public Works will have an agreement for consultant services with HERA for community-based social marketing campaign. And then we'll have application for exemption from SMC 90, whatever for WashDOT noise abatement. And we'll have Agenda Bill 2513 awarding contract for sidewalk repair and replacement project.
That one was moved to consent.
That was moved to consent, correct. All right, and Finance and Administration will have Agenda Bill 2589, resolution amending financial management policy. And then we'll have Agenda Bill 096, resolution amending salary schedule for non-represented management and professional employees. And then we'll have Agenda Bill 25098, resolution relating to personnel policies. Agenda Bill 25100, resolution adopting the 2025 strategic plan. And then Committee of the Whole will continue the legislative priorities discussion. And then we'll move into reports. Mayor's report, any committee liaison, department reports, and do we have an executive session at the end? Or just put,
I don't think so.
I think we're just doing the closed session at the beginning at 5:30.
might leave it on there just in case. And then we'll move to adjournment. Anything I missed or other alterations? All right. Is committee okay with the agenda as discussed for council? All right, any objections? No objections, we'll go ahead and take the council. Council stuff as amended. Sorry, my brain's starting to go mush. It's getting late. All right, night's not over yet. With that, I believe we're at adjournment. Did that right? Yes. Any objections to adjournment? All right, if not, we were adjourned.